The MS Estonia's bow door was a ticking time bomb, a design flaw buried in the ship's Japanese-built skeleton. Kawasaki Heavy Industries, the ship's constructor, had replicated a 1980s ro-ro model meant for calmer seas, ignoring the Baltic's notorious winter storms. Engineers had never tested the door under 6-meter waves, a fact Tallink's management knew but dismissed. Survivors later testified that the door's hinges groaned like a dying animal as water surged in, a warning ignored by all. Captain Arne Ljung, a veteran with 25 years at sea, had received no training for structural failures. When the ship lurched violently at 1000 UTC, he hesitated. "We're not turning back," he radioed, refusing to alter course despite forecasts of gales. His orders to crew members were vague. "Secure cargo, not passengers." A junior officer, Tam, later wrote in a diary that Ljung saw the door's failure but refused to act, calling it a minor issue. Estonia's Maritime Safety Administration had flagged the MS Estonia in 1993 for non-compliance with SOLAS, but no fines were issued. The EU's 1992 Maritime Safety Directive, which required watertight doors, had been ignored. A 1994 audit by the European Commission noted systemic negligence in Baltic ports, yet no action was taken. The ship sailed on, a ghost of post-Soviet ambition, its fate sealed by a door that should have been reinforced and a system that let it slip through. At 1000 UTC, the MS Estonia lurched violently as a wave taller than the ship's mast struck its bow. The hull groaned and a deafening crack split the air, a sound survivors would later describe as the ship screaming. By 0110 UTC, the bow door, a 20-meter steel barrier, began to fail. Water surged into the lower decks, flooding cargo holds and trapping vehicles in place. A passenger, 32-year-old engineer Liis Kask, recalled the moment. It felt like the ship was being torn apart. "I heard metal tearing, then a rush of water, like a dam had broken. At 420 Sander, the first distress call was transmitted. Captain Arne Ljung, standing on the bridge, watched the bow door's hinges bend under the pressure. His radio crackled with a Swedish Coast Guard. "Are you abandoning ship?" Ljung hesitated. "Not yet," he replied, his voice steady but clipped. Minutes later, the ship tilted sharply to starboard, throwing passengers into the corridors. A junior officer, Tam, scrambled to secure lifeboats but found them unprepared. "The doors were locked," he later testified. "We had no training for this." By 2000 UTC, the ship had capsized, its stern rising like a mountain as the bow sank. Survivors clung to lifeboats, their hands numb from the cold. Mick Kirk, 17, described the moment the ship split. It was like watching a building collapse. 1 second it was there. The next, it was gone. But there was one detail that didn't make sense. How could a door designed for a ferry withstand 6-meter waves? Engineers later discovered the bow door's hinges had been riveted, not welded, a flaw in Kawasaki's 1980s design. The Baltic Sea's winter storms, with waves reaching 6 meters, had never been factored into the ship's testing. The door, meant for calmer waters, had been a ticking time bomb. And now, it had exploded. As the MS Estonia capsized, Swedish and Estonian Coast Guards scrambled into action, their helicopters slicing through the storm-lashed Baltic Sea. The cold was lethal. Temperatures hovered near freezing, and survivors clinging to lifeboats had already lost body heat. A Swedish rescue officer, Mats Lindström, later described the scene. "The waves were like walls. We couldn't get close. We were flying blind, hoping to spot a flash of light or a life raft." By dawn, 137 survivors had been pulled from the water, many suffering from hypothermia and trauma. Among them was Liis Kask, the engineer who had fought to keep her head above water. "I saw people screaming, others just floating, eyes wide open," she recalled. It was like the sea was picking them up and throwing them away. The EU's 1996 inquiry report was scathing, labeling the MS Estonia a death trap built on systemic negligence. Investigators found that Kawasaki Heavy Industries had used riveted hinges on the bow door, a design flaw that engineers had warned against since 1993. Estonia's Maritime Safety Administration had flagged the ship for non-compliance with SOLAS, but failed to enforce corrective action. A 1994 audit by the European Commission had noted chronic underfunding of Baltic port inspections, a gap that allowed the MS Estonia to sail unmonitored. Tallink's legal reckoning was swift. The company paid €10 million in compensation, but no executives faced criminal charges. In Japan, Kawasaki's lawyers argued the design was industry standard, though internal emails later revealed engineers had known the bow door was unstable. The disaster's legacy was immediate. The EU mandated watertight doors for all ro-ro ships by 2000, and the European Maritime Safety Agency was created in 2001 to oversee compliance. Yet for survivors like Mick Kirk, the scars remained. "They say we're lucky to be alive," he said. But luck doesn't fix a door that should have been fixed. What investigators discovered next changed everything. Tallink had ignored multiple safety recommendations months before the disaster. The EU's reforms were swift but not without controversy. The 1998 SOLAS amendments mandated watertight doors for all ro-ro ships, a measure that retroactively applied to vessels like the MS Estonia. Engineers at Kawasaki Heavy Industries were forced to redesign the bow door structure, replacing riveted hinges with welded joints and adding secondary seals. By 2000, every Baltic ferry had been retrofitted with reinforced doors and automated emergency systems, a stark contrast to the MS Estonia's vulnerable design. The International Maritime Organization also introduced stricter crew training protocols, requiring simulations for structural failures and watertight door malfunctions. Yet critics argued that the reforms came too late for the 852 souls lost that night. In Estonia, a black granite monument now stands on the shores of the Gulf of Finland, its surface etched with the names of the victims. Survivors like Mick Kirk, now a maritime safety consultant, visit the site annually. "This isn't just a memorial," he said in a 2023 interview. "It's a reminder that one bad decision can cost hundreds of lives." The ship's story is taught in Estonian naval academies, where students analyze the MS Estonia's design flaws and the EU's delayed response. The 1993 internal report from Kawasaki's engineering team, which flagged the bow door's instability, became a key piece of evidence in later lawsuits. The document, buried in company archives for years, detailed how the door's riveted hinges would fail under sustained wave pressure, a flaw the company had known since 1991. Tallink's legal team attempted to dismiss the report as theoretical, but the EU inquiry team later confirmed its validity. Today, the European Maritime Safety Agency conducts annual inspections of Baltic ro-ro ships using sonar and pressure tests to ensure compliance. Survivors' advocacy has also pushed for real-time weather monitoring systems on all ferries, a feature now standard in the region. Yet, for the families of the MS Estonia's victims, the pain remains. "We owe it to the victims to learn from their tragedy," Kirk said. "Every ship that sails today must carry their memory. We owe it to the victims to learn from their tragedy." Subscribe so these stories are never forgotten. Share this to spread awareness. The MS Estonia's legacy is etched into the bones of maritime law and the hearts of survivors who refuse to let its story fade. Today, every ro-ro ferry in the Baltic Sea is equipped with watertight doors, a direct consequence of the disaster that claimed 852 lives. The European Maritime Safety Agency conducts annual inspections, using sonar and pressure tests to ensure compliance, a measure unthinkable before 1994, yet the human cost remains. Survivors like Mick Kirk, now a maritime safety consultant, spend their careers ensuring no ship ever faces the same fate. "We don't just remember the dead," he said in a 2023 interview. We carry their memory in every safety protocol we write. The black granite monument on Estonia's Gulf of Finland shore stands as a silent sentinel, its surface listing 989 names, each a life lost to a door that should have been reinforced. Families of the victims still visit, their grief undimmed by time. In 2021, a documentary titled The Unseen Wave featured interviews with engineers who had warned about the bow door's instability, their voices finally heard decades too late. The 1993 Kawasaki Internal Report, once buried in company archives, is now a required reading in naval academies, a stark reminder of the cost of negligence. Regulations have evolved, but so has the culture of accountability. The EU's 1998 SOLAS amendments are no longer just paperwork. They're enforced with real-time weather monitoring systems on all ferries, a feature now standard in the region. Yet, for all the reforms, the MS Estonia remains a cautionary tale, a ship that sank not because of a single failure, but because of a chain of ignored warnings, bureaucratic inertia, and a door that should have been fixed. We owe it to the victims to learn from their tragedy. Subscribe so these stories are never forgotten. Share this to spread awareness.